Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be with you again. I'm Benjamin Griffin here with Rabbi Joe Charnes. We're excited to be diving into another week of Come Follow Me study in the last few chapters of Alma. So, Rabbi Joe, tell me what stuck out to you this week. What insights did you get from this section?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And as I said last week, when we lost Brother Alma and I was mourning, this week we leave Brother Alma's words. We leave the entire book, which leaves me equally grieving. But I look forward to Helaman. I look forward to Helaman. And what I thought on this week, going through it's a large section, it's probably not the easiest chapter for us to read to find deep spiritual insight on the face of it, because we're dealing with so much of what tragically is still with us in our times, which is war. And I really was trying to reflect on how can we go through these chapters which deal with the tragedy of war and not simply read it as the history back then. That's my approach in general. I try to see the relevance of these words as if it's taking place now. What happened? Remember that teaching of the rabbis, the deeds of our ancestors are a sign for us. So what signs, what symbols, what events can I relate to in this section of Alma that can guide me through life, specifically in the context of the tragedy and the struggles of war, so that I'm not just reading about, but I'm experiencing with them back then, but also today, with the sorrow and the suffering that results from war. And what I noticed was up front a few things that really stuck out to me. And I'll read just a few little highlights of some sections. Again, we don't have to memorize them. I'm not going to comment deeply. I just want us to have, I'm grateful that these words are here for us. And so in Alma chapter 53, if we start with it's speaking of the people of Ammon. And in verse 11, it speaks of an oath that they took to keep from taking up arms against their brethren. For they had taken an oath that they never would shed blood more. Now, personally, in my own life, my own theology, and Judaism in general is not a religion of pacifism. We believe in defending life, even if it means, tragically, we have to take life. But I genuinely appreciate how we are starting off here in Alma 53 with an oath, a commitment, a dedication to life that is so deep that we can't shed blood. We can't. Again, I respect this tremendously, even if it's not my theology. But it's something to keep in mind because very often we're just cheerleaders for our side. There was suffering before the people of Ammon, but they still decided to remain people of peace. And I think that is something that we have to keep close to our hearts. Can we still, even if we're not following in the footsteps of the people of Ammon, can we at least have in our hearts a brokenness if we have to shed blood more? Because, as we'll see in a few moments, even if we believe that we are justified in taking life in the context of war to save life, it's not something we should be celebrating. So in Alma 55:19, it says, "But behold, this was not the desire of Moroni. He did not delight in murder or bloodshed." It's not saying he didn't participate in war, but his delight was not to war with his brothers. And that's just, again, it's a meditation. It's in Hebrew we say it's a kavanah. It's an intention that we must have, especially those who are in battle and having to face life and death. It's not something we want to ever take lightly or casually. In Alma 56, verse 2, it speaks of being in the tribulations of our warfare. Again, this isn't glorifying in war. It's acknowledging the suffering, the tribulations, and the tragedy that often take place during wartime. And maybe just one more in chapter 61 of Alma. Again, just to set the foundation here. 61, verse 14. It says, "Therefore, my beloved brother Moroni, let us resist evil." But I love this next phrase, and I know the second part of the sentence is going to will shift gears, but I love this as at least an initial approach. This is a holy approach. He says, let us resist evil. We all must resist evil, both the internal temptation and the evil that is around us. We must resist. But here's the line that really jumped out. And whatsoever evil we cannot resist with our words, comma. So I'm stopping there. The path here is first seek peace with words. Try and resolve the conflict. Try and resist the evil before you with holy words, with holy speech, with holy teachings, with holy insight. Because very often our first course of action is simply to respond with physical violence. Now, it does go on to say, yes, if it doesn't work, he continues, resist them with swords, that we may retain our freedom. Okay? I understand that second half also. All I'm trying to highlight here is we must take every step, which we probably all know, and I'm just repeating, the equivalent of 2 + 2 is 4, as if this is an insight. We have to, in times of battle and struggle, never lose sight of the humanity of the other that we are battling with. And this is it's a very difficult line, because in Genesis 1, when it speaks of the creation of human beings, of Adam, generically humans, it says that they are in the image of God and in the likeness of God. And so what I'm saying to try to humanize these war texts for us is that even when war is necessary, and I, in my, again, theology, I do believe there are times there's just war. A tragedy because it involves killing, but it's sometimes just a necessary part of life. But what I'm trying to begin, at least, to have us reflect on is never to lose sight of the, quote, enemy, as if they are not human. Because when it says in Genesis 1 about Adam, we understand that is humanity, as I'm sure you do. We all have that divine image within us. We all have that spark of the Holy One above. And so when we are taking a life in the context of war or self-defense, it's never a cause for celebration, because the tragedy is that a person, a human being created in the divine image, has cut themselves off, divorced themselves from their own divine light and inner beauty. And the tragedy is what could have been had they lived with that light. This world could have been so much more beautiful and better. So when we do have to participate in these battles, my hope is that we understand the evil has to be removed at times. And sometimes it involves, again, sadly and tragically, the taking of life. but never to lose sight of the tragedy that a human life was lost, because they all, every human being, has that light of the divine within them. And what happens often in war times, if we look in Alma 62:41, we often lose sight of light and hope and humanity because of war. And it says here, but behold, because of the exceedingly great length of the war between the Nephites and the Lamanites, just substitute any group of people for that. Many had become hardened. Pause. It's a comma. The truth is we are hardened. We're hardened, forget wartime actually, just the battles that we all struggle with in life, the pain. We harden. Our hearts become hard, our minds become hard, we become numb and desensitized. It says it right here, because of the exceedingly great length of the war, many had become hardened. And my prayer for us, and we'll continue with the verse in a moment, is that we remember, yes, that is often our response. But it's not the only response that is possible, because the rest of the verse gives us a beautiful, beautiful reminder of our potential, which is, and many were softened because of their afflictions. This, friends, is a gift, because it's reminding us that the sadness and the sorrow and the struggle and the pain and the tribulations and the trials of life and war absolutely harden us. You can't go through life in battle without being hardened. Otherwise, you're not human if it doesn't affect you. We have to harden ourselves because it's too painful at times. But also remember the second half, the rest of the line, the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. And many were softened by their afflictions. And many were softened because of their afflictions. Because of. That the afflictions were the cause of their softening. How rare is that in our lives? When we receive an insult, are we generally more gracious and gentle? This is in times of battle. The afflictions were the cause. Because of their afflictions, they were softened. That is a gift. If we take that to heart, in your language, ponder. And I don't mean just say the word ponder. I mean ponder deeply until you ask yourself, painfully, how often am I simply hardening? How often am I simply hardening when I have this beautiful potential to soften? Even if I must continue in battle, can I retain some sense of that heart of flesh, a living, breathing heart of flesh, a mind of compassion, a heart of compassion in the midst of the tragedies? Do I have to become hardened? And then what does it add right after that? We began with the exceedingly great length of the war. They were hardened. It says it again. The Nephites and the Lamanites had become hardened because of the exceedingly great length of the war. It's framed with, it didn't need to say that again. The exceedingly great length of the war, of our battles, whether they're on a personal level or a global, national level, it hardens. It hardens. Life often seems like it's just a series of battles that we are living through in between. And the only thing I can do is harden myself to make it through, which we have to do sometimes. But we also have that potential to remain soft and gentle and gracious and kind and loving, because that's also who we are. And that was such a beautiful, beautiful gift. And verse 49 in this same chapter, Alma 62. 1, 2, 3, well, I'll just read the whole verse. But notwithstanding their riches or their strength or their prosperity, they were not lifted up in pride, in the pride of their eyes. Here's the part I want to focus on in relation to being battle-tested, battle-hardened. How can I remain soft, or at least softening? It says here, neither were they slow to remember their Lord. We've got to keep the presence of God with us. And I say, keep the presence of God with us. The reminder that the divine is present before us. And that will allow us to touch something greater and more holy. That will allow us to become more of who we ultimately are. It's so difficult. I am not saying that this is something we can just immediately go to. But this is our potential. And it ends with, but they did humble themselves exceedingly before them. You notice that word exceedingly? That's the same word that we spoke of the exceedingly great length of the war. 2 times, beginning and the end of 41, of that little section we read. Exceedingly, exceedingly, we are sandwiched in between the battles and we are hardened. But we also have the potential to soften and become humble exceedingly before Him. We need to keep that before Him, that presence of the divine, of the light, of the holy, as a reminder of the light and the holy that we have within ourselves. This is not an easy calling. It is a calling, but it's not an easy calling. And I hope we can live with some light and some holiness and some image and some spark that we all have, that was breathed within to us in Genesis 2. We all have the image. We all have the likeness. And God breathed metaphorically that essence of His being within us. Can we allow ourselves on the battlefields of life, in the trenches or in our own personal battles? When we harden, and we will, don't kid yourself. When we harden, can we at least have the reminder that softening is possible? Humanity is possible. Compassion is possible. That is a gift. And if we can take that with us, even just a glimmer, then the war that is without won't fully consume us, because we will have some peace and wholeness within. Those are my thoughts for this week. Not an easy chapter, but an actual, you know what? This is a fitting tribute to Alma, that he's giving us how to make it through life, the darkest part of life, with the light of our humanity somewhat intact, because you can't go through war and sorrow and brutality and remain unaffected unless you're numb or hardened. So feel the pain, feel that pain, but also allow yourself to experience your being, your essence, the divine light from above that is always before us and within us. And all we got to do is be slow to remember. Take time to remember who we are. Take time to ponder these holy words. Thank you, Brother Alma. I will miss you until our next encounter 4 years from now, if we're still doing this. So that's what I have. And I say shalom in the most profound way, which is peace. I wish you peace, and I hope somehow we can bring some of this peace into our world, which is so fragmented and broken and tragically in war. Shalom.